Think you know the whole story? Turns out you were probably taught the half-truth. Welcome to Half-Truths. We've all been there. It's a moment of pure, slow-motion horror. The perfect bite of food, a slice of pizza, the last cookie from the jar, a glistening piece of watermelon in the summer, slips from your grasp. It arcs through the air, a beautiful, tragic parabola, before landing with a soft thud on the floor, a collective gasp, a moment of silence, and then a flurry of action. You dive, you snatch, you triumphantly hold the fallen morsel aloft, and, with the confidence of a seasoned physicist announcing a universal law, you declare 5-second rule. It's a phrase we all know. It's a get-out-of-jail-free card for the clumsy. A social contract that allows us to rescue a perfectly good snack from the abyss. We learned it on the playground, in the school cafeteria, from our parents who learned it from their parents. The rule is simple, elegant, and deeply comforting. If you can retrieve the dropped item from the floor in under 5 seconds, it's still good. The germs, microbes, and general floor funk haven't had enough time to board the ship. You can pop it in your mouth, no harm, no foul. It's a little victory against waste, a small triumph of speed over science. We say it with a wink and a nod, a shared piece of cultural folklore that transcends borders. It's a moment of playful defiance against the unseen world of bacteria we're told is lurking everywhere. It's a rule so ingrained in our collective consciousness that we rarely, if ever, stop to question it. It just is. But this is Half-Truths, the show where we take the things we just know and put them under the microscope. What if that 5-second window, that comforting buffer between delicious and disgusting, isn't a window at all? What if the story we tell ourselves about our quick reflexes and slow-moving germs isn't the whole story? Today, we're putting on our proverbial lab coats and pulling back the curtain on one of the most beloved and widely practiced half-truths of them all, the 5-second rule. The story we all know is a masterpiece of simple, intuitive logic. It feels right. In our minds, germs are like tiny, lazy invaders. When food lands on the floor, the germs are startled. They have to mobilize, get their little microbial act together, and then begin the slow, arduous process of climbing aboard this new, delicious vessel. This, our internal logic dictates, must take some time. 5 seconds seems like a reasonable estimate. It's short enough to feel urgent, requiring a swift recovery, but long enough to be achievable for the average person. It's not 1 second, which would be impossible, nor is it 10 seconds, which just feels recklessly unhygienic. 5 seconds, the golden mean of floor food. This narrative is powerful because it turns a moment of minor domestic failure into a game. Can you beat the clock? The prize is not just the food itself, but the satisfaction of cheating the system. It's a story that empowers us. We aren't just clumsy, we're quick-witted rescuers. We're not just eating floor food, we're applying a well-established principle of folk science. The rule is also a brilliant tool for social cohesion. When someone else drops their food, invoking the rule is a gesture of solidarity. You're saying, "It's okay, I get it. I'm not judging you." Save the donut. It absolves us of the guilt of wastefulness and the social awkwardness of eating something that has touched a potentially unclean surface. It's so pervasive that it has spawned its own mythology. A popular, though entirely fictional, story claims the rule can be traced back to Genghis Khan. The legend says that at his lavish banquets, the great Khan declared that if food fell on the floor, it could remain there for up to 12 hours and still be fit for him to eat. The logic, supposedly, was that food prepared for the Khan was so special, so divinely blessed, that it was above the petty concerns of spoilage or dirt. Of course, this is a complete fabrication, a fun bit of historical fan fiction. There's no evidence Genghis Khan ever said or did such a thing, but the existence of such a myth tells you how deeply we want to believe in the idea that some food or some situations are exempt from the normal rules of hygiene. The modern version, the 5-second one, is a product of our more germ-aware culture. It's a compromise. We know floors are dirty, but we also really want that last piece of chocolate. So we created a narrative that splits the difference. The germs are real, the story concedes, but they are not all-powerful. They are governed by the laws of time, and we, with our quick hands, are the masters of that time. This story has been reinforced by pop culture for decades. It's a throwaway line in sitcoms, a plot point in cartoons. It's a shared joke, a piece of common knowledge that binds us together. It's the perfect half-truth, plausible enough to be believed, and useful enough that we don't want to question it too deeply. But eventually, someone always starts pulling at the thread. The first tug often comes from simple, nagging questions. Who started the 5-second countdown? Is there a germ committee that decided on this specific interval? Do bacteria in a hospital lobby adhere to the same rules as the ones in my kitchen? The moment you apply even a little bit of critical thought, the beautiful simplicity of the rule starts to crumble. Why 5 seconds? Why not 3 or 7? The number feels completely arbitrary, chosen more for its pleasant ring than for any basis in reality. It's a number that sounds scientific without having any actual science behind it. The first person to really pull this thread in a formal way was a high school student named Jillian Clark. While working as an intern at the University of Illinois in the early 2000s, she decided to put this piece of folklore to the test. She and her supervising professor, Dr. Meredith Agel, embarked on what would become a landmark study in the field of floor food science. They took sterile gummy bears and cookies, dropped them onto floor tiles that had been deliberately contaminated with E. coli, and then measured what happened. They tested different lengths of time, from a few seconds up to a minute. What they found was the first real scientific nail in the coffin of the 5-second rule. Their results, published in 2003, showed that significant bacterial transfer happened in less than 5 seconds. In fact, it was more or less instantaneous. The clock didn't matter nearly as much as we thought. For this groundbreaking work, which bridged the gap between common myth and laboratory reality, Jillian Clark was awarded the 2004 Ig Nobel Prize in Public Health. The Ig Nobels, for those unfamiliar, are awards that celebrate research that first makes you laugh and then makes you think. And that's exactly what her study did. It took a funny, universal human habit and revealed the slightly unsettling truth hiding beneath it. Clark's study was a fantastic start, but it was just one study. The real deconstruction of the myth required more data, more variables. Scientists began to wonder about other factors. Does the type of food matter? What about the type of floor? It seems intuitive that a wet piece of fruit would pick up more gunk than a dry pretzel stick. And surely a freshly mopped kitchen tile is different from a grimy piece of public carpeting. These questions led to a new wave of research, moving beyond the simple question of if bacteria transfer in 5 seconds to the more nuanced questions of how much and under what conditions. One of the most comprehensive takedowns of the rule came in 2016 from a team of researchers at Rutgers University. Led by Professor Donald Schaffner, a food microbiologist, the team decided to conduct an exhaustive 2-year study. They weren't messing around with just gummy bears and cookies. They tested 4 different types of food: watermelon, which is very wet; bread with butter; and gummy candy, which is sticky but less wet than the watermelon. They also tested 4 different surfaces: stainless steel, ceramic tile, wood, and carpet. And they tested 4 different contact times: less than 1 second, 5 seconds, 30 seconds, and 300 seconds. They ran each combination multiple times, resulting in thousands upon thousands of measurements. This wasn't just a quirky experiment anymore. This was a rigorous, scientific investigation into a deeply held cultural belief. They were methodically, painstakingly mapping the true nature of the 5-second rule. And what they discovered was that the story we tell ourselves is not just a half-truth, it's a convenient fantasy, a comforting lie we whisper to our fallen snacks. The reality, as is so often the case, is far more complex and far more instantaneous. The countdown clock we all imagine is a myth. The race against the germs is over before it even begins. The real story, the one revealed by the meticulous work at Rutgers and other labs, is both simple and surprising. The single most important takeaway is this: bacterial transfer from a surface to food happens virtually on contact. It doesn't take 5 seconds. It often takes less than 1 second. In the world of microbes, our human perception of time is laughably slow. The transfer is, for all intents and purposes, instantaneous. The moment that cookie hits the tile, bacteria are already making the leap. So, the foundational premise of the 5-second rule, that there's a safe window before contamination occurs, is fundamentally false. However, and this is where the story gets really interesting, time does play a role, just not the one we thought. While contamination is immediate, longer contact times do generally result in the transfer of more bacteria. So, dropping your sandwich and leaving it there for a full 5 minutes is definitely worse than snatching it up in under a second. But the difference between picking it up instantly and picking it up after 4 seconds is not the difference between 0 germs and some germs. It's the difference between some germs and slightly more germs. There is no magical, germ-free grace period. The far more critical factors, the ones that really determine how contaminated your dropped food becomes, are moisture and surface type. This is where the Rutgers study provided its most fascinating insights. The wettest food, the watermelon, picked up the most bacteria by a long shot, regardless of how long it was on the surface. Conversely, the driest food, the gummy candy, picked up the least. This makes perfect sense. Bacteria don't have legs. They need a medium to travel, and moisture is the perfect superhighway for them to move from the floor to your food. So a dry cracker falling on the floor is inherently less risky than a dropped slice of cantaloupe. But the biggest surprise of all had to do with the surfaces. Which surface do you think transferred the least amount of bacteria? The clean-looking stainless steel, the smooth ceramic tile, the wood? No, the surface that consistently transferred the fewest bacteria was the carpet. I know, it sounds completely backward. We think of carpets as reservoirs of dust, hair, and all sorts of hidden horrors. But from a bacterial transfer perspective, their topography is actually a defense. The woven, uneven nature of carpet fibers means that the actual surface area of the food that makes contact with the contaminated parts of the carpet is much smaller. A piece of bread landing on a tile is making flat, total contact. The same piece of bread on a carpet is perched atop thousands of tiny fibers, with much of its surface suspended in the air. The tile and steel surfaces, being smooth and flat, allowed for the easiest and most efficient transfer of bacteria. So, the real story is a matrix of variables. The riskiest scenario is dropping something wet, like fruit, onto a smooth, hard surface, like tile or steel, and leaving it there for an extended period. The least risky scenario is dropping something dry and hard, like a pretzel, onto a carpet and picking it up immediately. Notice that immediately is the key word. The 5-second rule gives us a false sense of security. It distracts us from the factors that actually matter. It's a simple answer to a complex question, and like most simple answers, it's wrong. The truth is that our environment is teeming with microbes. They are on our floors, our counters, our hands, and even in our bodies. Most are harmless. Some are beneficial, and a few can make us sick. The decision to eat a piece of dropped food isn't really about a 5-second race. It's a game of probability. You're weighing the perceived cleanliness of the surface, the type of food, and the potential presence of dangerous pathogens like Salmonella or E. coli against your desire to not waste the food. The 5-second rule is just a story we invented to help us make that calculation feel less like a gamble and more like a sure thing. The science, however, is clear. The gamble is real, and the house, in this case the microbial world, always has an edge. So, we began with a simple, comforting rule, a piece of folklore passed down through generations. A rule that turned a clumsy accident into a winnable game against time and germs. The 5-second rule. It was a story of a safe window, a grace period where our food remained pure, protected by our own quick reflexes. It was a half-truth that felt so right, so logical, that we accepted it without question. Then we started pulling at the thread. We asked where the rule came from and found only myths and speculation. We followed the trail of curious scientists, from a high school intern to a university research team who decided to stop speculating and start measuring. And in their data, the simple story fell apart. We discovered that the 5-second window is a fiction. Contamination is not a slow crawl, it's an instantaneous leap. The race is over before we even hear the starting gun. The real story, we learned, isn't about a magic number. It's about a complex dance between moisture, topography, and time. It's the story of wet watermelon on smooth tile being a microbial disaster, while a dry cracker on a fuzzy carpet is a far safer bet. The truth, as it so often is more nuanced and more fascinating than the myth it replaced. It reveals the surprising physics of bacterial transfer and forces us to rethink our assumptions about what clean and dirty really mean. So why does correcting this particular myth matter? It's not as if millions of people are falling ill from practicing the 5-second rule every day. Our immune systems are generally robust enough to handle the low-level exposure we get from a dropped cookie on a relatively clean kitchen floor. This isn't about fear-mongering. It's about understanding the stories we tell ourselves to navigate the world. The 5-second rule is a perfect example of a mental shortcut, a convenient fiction that helps us manage the invisible risks of daily life. We can't see bacteria, so we create a simple, controllable rule to govern our interactions with them. Unlearning the 5-second rule is a small act of intellectual honesty. It's an admission that the world is more complex than our simple rules suggest. It reminds us that folklore and intuition, as comforting as they may be, are no substitute for evidence. The real story teaches us that what truly keeps us safe isn't a mythical countdown, but a genuine understanding of how the world around us, even the invisible microbial world, actually works. It encourages us to trade our comforting fictions for a more complicated, but ultimately more accurate picture of reality. And in the end, that choice between the simple lie and the complex truth is one we face every single day, often in ways far more consequential than deciding the fate of a fallen piece of toast. Now you know the real story. What other half-truths are still out there? If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a comment, and join us next time. Until then, stay curious.